Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about movies, music. You know what? I've been doing these. I'm on my 40th video here. I think that means it's time to turn it up a notch. Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about movies, music, art, and culture. And today, we're going to be talking about the new country album from Chris Young titled AM. Now, I've talked a number of times about modern country music and how, in moving towards the mainstream, it's lost some of its edge and texture, and on a higher level, some of its culture, in favor of catering to a larger audience. Now, I've reviewed a few of the acts that have gone towards the pop country vein, that'd be your Taylor Swift and your Keith Urban, and a few that have gone towards what is now branded the bro country vein, which is like your Luke Bryan and your Billy Currington. Now, I gotta stress here that this shift towards the mainstream is typical in country music. It's come up a couple of times. It happened in a big way in the 80s and even a larger way in the 90s, and now it's happening again today. And at each point of these shifts towards the mainstream and a subsequent loss of culture, there has been significant pushback in favor of what I would call the neo-traditionalist country movement. This is country music that harkens back to the bluegrass and traditional country of the 50s and 60s, not so much the 70s. And there has been some highly successful acts that have led the charge in this vein. These are guys like Alan Jackson and George Strait and Tracy Byrd and Randy Travis, and to a lesser extent Vince Gill. Now, as somebody who likes country music that has gone towards the mainstream and something in the neo-traditionalist vein, I can see positives and negatives to this pushback. After all, it's a good thing to know your history, know your culture. It lends authenticity to your music, and I would certainly prefer it over the direct you get when you have the typical southern pandering, which has popped up a lot in mainstream country music, which is just being pumped out by the Nashville song producing machine. That being said, if you stay too close to the well of history without innovation, you run the risk of stagnation, or even worse, irrelevance. Now, thankfully, this hasn't happened yet, and thus it goes without saying that I'm more fond than not of neo-traditionalist country music. But for a while there, I was starting to get concerned that there wouldn't be that pushback in country music against the mainstream that would achieve some sort of success. Would I be forced to retreat back into outlaw country or alternative country music to find something with texture or quality or culture? Well, fortunately, I don't need to do that yet, because outside of the mainstay stalwarts like Alan Jackson, we do have a newer country act who is willing to bear the torch of the neo-traditionalist country movement. And he comes from a slightly unlikely source. The guy's name is Chris Young, and for those of you who don't know, he started his career quite young when he was encouraged to try out for Nashville Star, a reality show in the vein of a country version of American Idol. And when he actually won that show, it would be the reasonable assumption of everybody that this guy would start making the sort of polished pop country music that gets popular. That didn't happen. Chris Young pulled something of a Kelly Clarkson. He began to reassert himself in songwriting and in the country music scene in a big way, trying to change his own artistic direction. It definitely helped matters that Chris Young just had a great voice that was born to sing traditional country music. It was rich, it was deep, it was powerfully emotive, and it was loaded with this genuine heartfelt sincerity. And with several assorted success in the past decade, he's finally come roaring back with his new album AM this year. So, how'd it turn out? Well, all things considered, it turned out pretty damn good. Chris Young delivers a very solid, very strong country album in AM that I'm definitely inclined to like. However, there are a few nitpicks that I'm going to make that means I'm not going to be able to consider it a masterpiece, and because these nitpicks did kind of rub me the wrong way. However, I'm not quite sure I can assign all the blame to Chris Young here, which makes talking about this album in some terms a little bit more complicated. That being said, it's a very, very good album that I can recommend right out of the gate, and definitely shows signs of how Chris Young has matured as an artist. First, let's start with the unequivocal positives that everybody can agree on. Chris Young is a great country singer, and between his voice and the way he throws himself into his songs with impressive gusto and aplomb, it gives him a lot of personality on tracks where he's expected to play both the rough and tough, hard-edged country dude and the sensitive type. His voice is naturally rich and deep and manages to sound impressively imposing almost without even trying. The fact that he does try makes a lot of his songs all the better. And yet on the slower tracks, he manages to sound romantic and genuine without come across as condescending or as an alpha male douchebag. He actually comes across as having a certain amount of class and maturity, which is surprising for a country singer of his age. Now, a big part of this credit must go to the songwriting, and here's where I honestly wished Chris Young and his had more songwriting credits on this album, because he and his mainstay collaborators do a really good job, and they're technically good country songwriters in the traditional vein. Yeah, sure, there are songs about booze and girls, but It's country music. You're always going to have songs about booze and girls, and they're not framed with any of the obnoxious southern pandering you see cropping up elsewhere in country music these days. These are songs that are informed by southern culture and yet not reinforcing stereotypes, which is a great natural fit for Chris Young. And what becomes interesting in the artistic direction, in specific within the traditionalist country genre, is that Chris Young is leaning towards two very distinct directions. The first is towards hard edge country rock. That's borderline outlaw country on songs like We're Gonna Find It Tonight, while the second leg is leaning towards some of the more softer ballads that made Chris Young a big hit in the first place on his past few albums. Now, he's a good fit for both directions, I'll definitely say that. But I'd argue he's a little bit better suited for the ass-kicking, hell-raising brand of country music that's still able to have a good time and not come across as abrasive or confrontational than he is for the slower material, if only for the reason that we have a lot fewer of the ass-kickers in country music that come across as genuine and actually kind of awesome. The interesting thing, though, is that when Chris Young writes his songs about raising hell and partying hard, he does so with a little bit more nuance that makes the songs less interchangeable and gives them some real personality. The opening single, Oh No, might sound like a bunch of braying assholes at a bar, but really the funny thing about the song is it's a song about how Chris Young wants to leave. He wants to go home for work in the morning, and yet he ends up getting dragged along with for the rest of the ride because somebody got shots. He got dragged onto the dance floor. A couple girls came in, and the DJ's playing a song that he likes. He just gets caught up in the ride. It happens. And then there's songs like We're Gonna Find It Tonight, where Chris Young and his girlfriend set out to have a fantastic time together. It's a song with a ton of rollicking energy and momentum because it's a pair of equals set out to have the time of their lives and raise some real hell. She's calling her girlfriends, he's calling some of his boyfriends, and they're the combined nucleus together. It gives the song a very distinctive edge, and it's something that's a little bit different than your traditional going out and causing havoc scene. And it definitely helps matters that the instrumentation supports Chris Young so well on this album, with a lot of the brawny, swaggering texture and the guitars along for the ride. This is an album where the production really enforces these heavy tracks with thick, potent guitar riffs, designed for hard, wild nights, designed to be tracks that are paired whenever country girls go hop on the mechanical bull. These are almost songs that taking in a vein of Alice in Chains for how much weight and presence they have. As I said, it's borderline country rock, and Chris Young does a great job matching them for intensity because his voice is so naturally deep. It complements that rock edge so well. The one nitpick I will make here against the instrumentation and production is that the attempted elements of modernity with some of these drum machines creeping in, some electronic elements in production, it's pretty subtly hidden, but it is there. They just feel really out of place and awkwardly shoved in when they show up. They don't show up often, so that makes it a reasonably minor nitpick, all things considered. But a bigger issue, I said as before, comes in the artistic direction. As I said, Chris Young seems to have a fair idea where he wants to take this album, but a few of his other songwriters have other plans, looking to push it more towards the areas of bro country and pop country, and it's not as good of a fit for him, I'd argue. What's more, some of the slower tracks are just inundated with some of this real corniness that doesn't quite fit Chris Young particularly well. Sure, songs like Text Me Texas, it's not a bad song. It's well written in all things considered, and Chris Young sells it well. I'll definitely give him that. But I don't think it works as well for him because he seems to be the more old-fashioned romantic who's designed to deliver a lot of his songs with a little bit more maturity and presence, and he doesn't need to rely on that degree of corny jokes. As I said, none of these additional songs, they're not bad per se, but they're a bit generic and boilerplate, kind of filler, all things considered, and I wasn't all that impressed. So, in the end, where do I stand on Chris Young's AM? Well, it's a little hard to say, to be honest. It's got better highs and arguably less lows than Billy Currington, but at the same time, it's kind of feels like an album that was stalled out between multiple artistic directions, and thus it's a bit of a hodgepodge of the various choices all jammed together. That being said, the majority of these choices are executed well, and the technical songwriting is solid across the board, and Chris Young is a good enough performer that he can sell the songs regardless of the genre within country. You know, I'm gonna go easy. No, hell, I'm not gonna go easy. I feel he deserves this. I'm gonna weigh in his favor. I'm going to give him an 8 out of 10. Like, if only to send the message back to the country music industry that this is the kind of country music that should be getting popular. This is the kind of stuff that I want to hear more of, and frankly, it's the kind of stuff that Chris Young does incredibly well. And while I don't think we might get much more of this neo-traditionalist country music, particularly in the mainstream, well, we've got Chris Young at least, and that's a pretty damn good start. So yeah, if you'd like to like and subscribe, thanks a lot for watching. If you can tell from my previous videos, I upgraded my camera, and I'm still working out all the bugs, but I think it looks a little bit better. And so if you have any other technical side that you would like to comment on, or if there's any other albums you'd like me to review, I'm more than open to taking a look. Otherwise, I'll see you next time.